This is your ultimate guide to one of the greatest and most common openings, the Ruy Lopez. I've stacked this video with everything you need to know to play this like a world champion. That includes plans, traps, ideas, theory, and full coverage of every variation they can play. Let's get started. This comes after we go pawn to e4 here, black responds pawn to e5, we now play knight to f3, attacking their pawn, knight to c6 here defending, very standard, and we now play bishop b5. And what are the ideas of this move? Well, one, we can now castle, which we'll do in every variation, and secondly, we put pressure on their knight, which in turn weakens their e5 pawn by a lot. And to start off, let's take a look at knight to f6, the Berlin defense, known for being very boring, but I have found an extremely fun way of playing while still being objectively fantastic. First here, you are going to castle and let them capture your pawn, and you're not going to play rook to e1 here just yet, but first pawn to d4. Striking in the center, attacking a lot of pieces, and if they capture here, now this would be opened up, and I'll cover this line afterwards, but first I want to take a look at knight drops back to d6, the most common move, and what would usually head into the drawing line after we trade here. However, instead we have a fantastic move, pawn takes on e5, which looks ridiculous because black can take our bishop and they are up a bishop here, but what you want to notice is that their knight now is completely trapped. It has no way of getting out, meaning that whenever we want, we can play a4 on a dime and simply win the knight back. But while we have this tempo up, we're going to take advantage. We're going to play bishop to g5. Attacking their queen, the really only good move here is bishop e7 blocking, at which point you're going to trade. They'll take back their queen, and with this threat here, this is not really a real threat. You're just going to go pawn to a4 and attack their knight. Now black here, as a last ditch effort, is going to move their knight into the center on d4, at which point we're going to capture, and here's some fun can happen. One, if they try to take on e5 with their knight, well, they are now lost. We play pawn to f4 here, attacking their knight, and the key idea is that after they drop it back, well, now the e file is open, rook e1, and they're not surviving this pin, and they're already lost. What else can they try? They can try to simply castle here, at which point you have a very fun line. First, you're going to go knight to b5 here, attack c7, and black actually has a clever way of playing with queen takes on e5. Just about everybody does this, defending the pawn like so, winning a pawn in the process, but it is not all sunshines and rainbows because we're going to go rook to e1 here. Attacking their queen, the only way they can keep the defense here is to not defend and go on the counterattack with queen takes on b2 and attack our rook, at which point we're going to move this knight to c3, and a black, even though they're up 2 pawns, we are actually better here. One, they have to be very careful. If they just play like a random move, let's say d6 here, then rook to b1, and their queen is completely trapped. Once again, that would be a very nice win for you. So instead, their really only move here, their only move here is queen to b4 to try and evacuate their queen right out of there, at which point you can now play knight to d5. Now you have the 2 knights working together, and c7 is definitely going to be lost. They have to drop their queen back, likely to a5 here, and after this knight takes on c7, you are dominating here. Even though black is still up a pawn, your knights are extremely strong, and black has zero way to get rid of them, meaning that is going to be a permanent problem for them, and you are dominating in that line. They have one more thing they can try here. Their best move is likely to trade our knight immediately. We take back for queen, and then they castle, but here we can simply go knight to c3, and we simply have so much more space in them, and our development is so much more easy. Their only real try here would probably be pawn to d6 to try and get their bishop out, and it's their best move, but it loses a pawn after takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and now simply rook a to d1. The pawn is attacked, and they are not going to be able to defend it. They can try to defend with the rook for one move, but then knight b5. They can try to push for one move, but then knight drops into c7, and this is very bad. And at the end of the day, you're going to be in a pawn up endgame with many more chances to actually win. Now let's head back here because there are a lot of other alternatives they can play. First, back in this position right here. Here they drop the knight back to attack our bishop, but they have one other thing they can try, that being capturing our pawn on d4. At which point here, you're now going to play rook to e1, pinning their knight to their king, which is very troublesome. They only have 2 moves here, d5 and f5 trying to defend. F5 is likely their weaker option. You're going to take on D4 now, and the biggest problem for them is that F3 is coming to attack their knight, which is pinned, and they have basically no way of stopping that. Their best line here is knight takes on D4, we take back, and then C6 to attack our bishop, and the easiest way to play here is to simply go F3. And just let it happen, because after this trade, you are just dominating here. Even though black is up a pawn, their structure is horrible. They're on the verge of a gigantic attack. They try to trade and get greedy. Rook takes e4, and they're already lost, so it's really a knife's edge, this position for them. And our development is much easier. We just have a great game. Their other line, pawn to d5, fares a little better. And after pawn to d5 here, we play the same move, knight takes on d4. F3 is coming, and now there's an additional threat of knight takes on c6 with the fork that would come afterwards. And so here, 95% of the time, this is going to be an extremely easy win. But for the sake of thoroughness, there's one line you should know here, which is bishop to d6. You take on c6, so if you're knight, and now bishop takes on h2. You only have one way to actually be winning here. That being the following line, king to h1, queen comes into h4, rook takes e4 check, pawn takes, queen into d8 check, forcing the trade, and at the end of the day, you are in a pawn down endgame, but you actually have the advantage. Because black's king is stuck in the center and susceptible to checks, their pawn on e4 is very weak, will likely be lost, and all around your development is a lot easier and overall just better. Now let's back up to this position right here, where we went bishop g5 to attack their queen. They have one other move other than bishop e7, that being f6. And how you're going to play here is you take with the pawn, they take back, we can play this check here, and this is the branching point. Half of people are simply going to go bishop e7 here, at which point you take an f6, take advantage of the pin, and you're basically already winning. However, the other half of people will play king to f7, which is actually a lot better than it seems. The way you want to play here is you want to play queen to d5 check, their king will walk over to g7, and now with this, you want to back your bishop up to d2. Stuff gets a little crazy here, because their knight can actually escape back to d6, and yes, we are down a full piece, but you'll see the engine actually gives us a slight advantage, because we're going to play queen to h5 here. And black has a massive attack brewing on their king side. I'll give you all the attacking ideas. Your queen can come into h6 with your bishop, or drop back to g4 to give a check. Your knight will make the very important rotation h4 to f5 to give a check like this. And your rook here will either go to e3 and rotate all the round to g3 and give a check like that, or in some variations it may even drop all the way into e8, and that can be also very devastating. So that is a pretty insane attacking line. Let's head back to here where black captured the pawn. They have some other alternatives. Let's take a look at bishop to c5. This is probably the worst of them, because you have a very nice trick here. Knight takes on e5. Point being, after they take back, we now have pawn to d4 here, and they are getting forked. And the most common line here is they capture, we take back, knight will drop back here, this trade, and now simply knight to c3. It's not a very complicated position, you're just better. More space, easier development. You can also go bishop g5 to get a nice pin on their knight, and go e5 here to attack it as well. You're just doing great there. They can also try, let's say, pawn to d6 here. This Steinitz Defense, and you're simply going to go rook to e1 here, keep the pawn defended, and after bishop to d7 on pinning. And the plan here you always want to go for is c3, going for the d4 central pawn break. It also has a nice little bonus here, that being the bishop, when drops back, can always head to c2 as well, or b3. Both options are very good. I tend to prefer up in c2, so I prefer this line a lot. Most people are simply going to go bishop to e7, just try to complete their development and get castled, and their position is just so incredibly tight here, basically no space. We can now play pawn to d4, strike in the center. They will castle, and now we just back our bishop up to a4, and we're just doing really good here. Other moves you might want to play would be like h3 to prevent their bishop from getting to g4 and pinning here. Your knight will likely go on a rotation from d2 to f1 to g3, and you have a nice amount of space to play with compared to black here, who is very much suffering. And if they ever try to capture, then after pawn takes back, we just have a complete domination of the center that black cannot match. And lastly, back here they have one more line, that being pawn to a6 to attack our bishop. Here you're going to capture, pawn takes back, and now knight takes on e5. Usually this kind of stuff doesn't really work that well because black would have queen to d4 here, fork our pawn and our knight, at which point we would just lose the pawn right back. But this doesn't really work here because we can just back the knight up. And if queen takes, rook e1, and they get pinned. Their other try here might be knight takes on e4 like so, but it's a very similar story, rook to e1, and there is a lot of trouble happening for them. Now let's take a look at pawn to a6, the Morphy defense, attacking our bishop, and here you just want to back up to a4 and keep the tension. They have two moves here, knight to f6 and pawn to b5, the Caro Variation, which I'll look at after. When they play this, attacking your pawn, it carries a lot of similarities to the Berlin, but it is different, and here you want to go pawn to d4, striking in the center immediately, and there is going to be a lot of problems for them. Black will almost always capture your pawn on d4, and here you're simply going to castle. Now, there's a lot going on, and I'll leave these sidelines after. For now, their main move is bishop to e7, simply just trying to develop, get castled, but you are not going to let that happen. You're going to go e5. Attack their knight and start getting aggressive. They have two moves here, knight d5 and knight e4. Knight d5 is the slightly worse option. Here you want to go bishop b3, just attack it. They have to back their knight up to b6, and now rook to e1 here, just keeping the pawn defended. You'll soon capture on d4, like after castles, you capture, and this trade, you're just doing well here. You have way more space, a much stronger position. The only thing you have to watch out for is if they try d6 here and try to start getting developed. The way you want to counteract this is you want to trade and then play bishop f4, go for another trade, because here you'll now play knight c3, move your other rook to the second open file, and you'll just be completely rolling them. This game is definitely yours. Knight to e4 is their better option because they can reroute to c5 and attack our bishop. However, it doesn't really change our plan that much. Here you're going to capture on d4. And their best move here when looking at this is to simply castle, at which point you want to go rook to e1. Attacking their knight and provoking them, their only really good move here is knight drops back to c5 to attack our bishop, and now you have a really crazy line. You want to go knight to f5, which looks completely insane because yes, you're losing your bishop like the other line, but here you now have queen to g4. Your knight and your queen team up on their pawn. Obviously that is a checkmate. They must respond. g6 is their only move, and here you now have knight takes e7, queen takes, and now queen takes on a4. This might look surprising because our attack has now completely gone away, but the idea here is that now, because we did that, their dark squares are extremely weak, and that is going to bite them in the future. Trying to capture the pawn on e5 is going to go badly for them because we want to play f4. We can't play it just yet because knight to f3, and this is kind of a disaster. So instead, you simply want to play bishop d2, and most people are not going to see f4 is a threat. If they do see it, if they play like queen f6, try to move out the way, then simply knight to c3 here, and you are just dominating. Even though black is up a pawn, you're going to drop your knight in, and their dark squares are extremely weak. A ton of problems arise for them, and already they have to play extremely passively and defensively. Instead here, their main move is pawn to d6 to try and attack like this, at which point you have the following moves. Bishop to h6, attacking their rook, rook over to e8. At this point, they have so much pressure here, and don't try to hang on, just let them have it. You want to go knight to c3. The same idea, because after captures, you move your knight into d5. Their dark squares are extremely weak, and because of that, you're going to get your knight in, you're going to get your bishop in, and they are losing. And they are suffering in so many lines here. In this position, their only move that does not lose is queen to d8, which I think there's only like one game ever. Their much more common move here is queen to d6, but you have a very nice way to play here. Queen to h4, getting this because the idea is if they take your knight, queen to f6, and this checkmate is unstoppable. Another idea for you to have in mind, that works out very well for you. Let's start heading back now to some other alternatives. Let's take a look at this position. Here, instead of castling, they can try two things. One, they can try to trade your knight and center immediately, at which point you're going to take back for queen, knight to c5 here, and this is not that challenging. When this is a threat, it doesn't really matter. Simply knight to c3, just defend. This trade can happen. It doesn't affect you that much, and after castles and bishop f4, you just have way more space, much better development. Put your rooks on the center files, and I mean, yeah, you're just doing a very good job there. Not too much to talk about. What is more complicated is the immediate knight to c5. Normally here, when this move happens, your queen is already on d4 to defend the bishop, but that cannot happen quite yet. However, here you have a very fun line. Knight to f5. Once again, because the point of the sacrifice is that if they just capture here, you have the following line: knight takes g7 check, king to f8, bishop h6, threatening some nasty knight to e6 double discovered check business. Their only move here, king to g8, at which point now f4, and yeah, even though you're down a piece, you're gonna go rook f3, you're gonna go rook g3, you're gonna move your queen in, and they are getting absolutely murdered here. I would be very surprised if they find a way out without being checkmated, and so to avoid that, their best move from here is to castle, at which point it's very similar to the other position but slightly different because they have not captured just yet. And you want to go queen to g4 here, attack g7, very similar, but the difference is after g6 you're going to trade here. Pawn will take back, knight takes e7 check, queen takes, and now queen g3 here, keeping the pawn defended. And here you have the same key ideas of bishop h6, and their extremely weak dark squares are going to come to bite as you try and rotate your knight into them, and they have to be very careful here not to lose. Let's back up some more to this position right here. Bishop e7 is their best move, but they have some other tries. If they play knight takes an e4, you're going to play rook to e1 here with this pin, and this position is basically the same as we saw in the Berlin, only difference being a6 and bishop a4, which does not make any change to the position. If you want to look at the moves, I'll just timestamp that position on the screen right now. For the original lines they can play though, they can try bishop c5 here to try and hold on to the pawn. This does not work out well though, because we can play e5, attack their knight, and trouble happens for them. Knight d5 is their best move, but now bishop backs up to b3, attacking their knight. The most natural move here, knight to b6, which was the best move in the other position, is now losing here because knight g5. This is a big threat, but the problem being is if they just try to castle, then queen to h5, and this is looking very, very bad for them. They have to be careful not to get checkmated, and even if they don't, they're still completely lost here. They can try knight takes on e5 here to defend, but then rook to e1, and they are not getting out that easy. Their move here that would actually be good would be knight drops back to e7 here, like this, which is very, very difficult to find. That only occurs in like 10% of games. And here, I mean, your plan doesn't really change that much. You're going to go rook to e1, they castle. You can also play bishop to g5 here to pin their knight, get some tricky business, basically forcing a move like c6, which is just very ugly for them. You have many good moves here, my favorite being pawn to c3, going for a kind of gambit here because after captures and knight takes, at the end of the day in this position, black is up a pawn, but your pieces are so fantastically placed while black really lacks here, with this pawn basically being a complete guard from them doing anything. And you are doing awesome there. So bishop c5 is not that strong. They can also try b5 here to attack your bishop like so. It's not that great either. You're going to back your bishop up to b3, and here a lot of knight g5 ideas. Like if they go pawn to d6 here, knight g5, they're already basically losing. Knight e5 is really their only try of defending, at which point you have a nice line here. f4, knight drops to c4, trying to block out the bishop, but now e5. And at the end of the day, yeah, you're down 2 pawns, but rook to e1, the threat remains alive, and black must be extremely careful not to lose here. Their better try would be bishop c5 now, and just trying to get castled very soon. But while we still have e5, this is bad for them. knight to g4, trying to attack, but then bishop d5, pinning their knight to their rook. Now this knight is also stuck in no man's land. You can probably go h3 here. It has to back up to h6 and go for that trade. You were doing awesome. Now let's take a look at bishop c5, which you have some absolutely murderous tricks and traps against. First here, you're going to go pawn to c3, your idea to play d4 because their bishop is not very well placed. We can do that with d4 attacking it. Knight to f6 is their main move here to try and attack the pawn. And you now have a super fun trap. You're going to play pawn to d4 here. They are going to capture. You'll simply take back. They have two options here. They can back the bishop to b4 or to b6. b6 is not very good. You can play e5 to attack their knight, and after like knight d5 here, just castle. And I mean, you are just completely dominating the center here. You have two strong pawns, and black has nothing. You can also now play like a knight to c3 and go for this action. You have a super strong pawn mass in the center, and black has no good way of actually getting rid of it. So bishop b4 check is the better move, at which point you have the savage move, king to f1. This is murderous. The idea here is that their bishop is now actually kind of stuck, and a lot of variations that is going to get them killed. If they try to take on e4 now and just get super greedy, you are basically winning. Pawn to d5 here, attacking their knight. Knight drops back to e7, and now queen to d4 with this fork, and also g7 as well. A lot of big problems for them. Their only real try here, maybe use c6, but then you can simply take, you're up a piece. There you go, you're up a piece. You're winning on move 11. Very good for you. Their better try here would be castles, but it is still not that great. You now have queen to b3, putting pressure on their bishop and threatening some nasty stuff of trading or going d5 or e5. A lot of problems for them. a5 is their most common move to try and defend, and here you can now go a3. The bishop must back up to e7, which is such a sad square, and now knight c3. I mean, yeah, you're just completely dominating here. Massive center, massive development. Your king is on f1, but like it doesn't really matter. Black has absolutely no way of attacking you, and you are doing much better in this position. Let's back up to right here. They have some other options. They can try to play d6 here, which fails. To d4, it's the same trick as before. If they play b6 here, then pawn to d5, and their knight is simply lost. They have no way of getting out. a6, attack the bishop for one move, just backs up. There is nothing. They're already down a piece. If they try to capture here, you're going to take back. If it drops up to b6, then once again, d5 here, they are losing. So they have to play the check. And now once again, king to f1. Here, though, it's even stronger because we're going to have some combination of d5 and queen to a4, and we're basically always going to be winning a piece in this line. If they try pawn to a6 here to attack our bishop, you win with takes, and queen a4, and their bishop is actually trapped. Simply has no way out. a5 trying to defend, a3 attacking, it's trapped. You're already winning. Other try here, bishop d7. Slightly better, still not that great. You're going to go queen to a4 once again, and this is bad. If they try a5, you have the same a3 routine, and you're once again winning. d5 here, or sorry, after knight to e7, you go d5, attacking. Their knight must move somewhere, and then you simply take on b4. You're up a piece and completely winning. Even though your king might be slightly unsafe, yeah, you're just doing great here. And they have one more thing they can try, that being pawn to a6 to attack your bishop, and here you have a nice line of trading and then capturing on e5. And the same thing of going queen to d4 here, trying to fork us, just doesn't work because we played c3. And like 90% of the time, you'll easily go pawn to d4 here, castle, and you'll just be completely crushing them in this game. However, there is one line you should know, that being if they play queen to e7 or queen to g5, either line attacking your knight, you simply want to castle. Because after queen takes, this has drawn them into a fork, d4, and after queen drops back, this trade here and bishop b3, you're just doing great. Now let's take a look at the Caro Variation after pawn to a6, the Morphy Defense. We back up to a4, and here they play b5, trying to attack us. A lot of people play this line, but it is not good. First off, you have to back your bishop up to b3, and knight to f6 is the main move here, simply attacking your pawn. They can also try knight to a5, trying to really chase you down. It does not work well. The best line here, even better than just simply capturing the pawns now undefended, is to just castle, because after this trade here, you'll soon play pawn to d4. You're just completely rolling them in the center. They have to trade, and you can now take with your queen. You just have so much more space, so much more stuff to play around with, and you're all around just doing better. So knight to f6 remains the main move here, at which point you want to go d4. Once again, striking in the center immediately, and they have to be very careful. And they have 4 main moves they can play here. If they try knight takes on e4, you'll simply take on e5 here. You're just doing great, and you now have ideas of playing queen to d5 with a fork, which can get very dangerous. Bishop e7 here, queen d5, you're already winning. So to prevent that, they must try to drop their knight back to c5, and when you are confronted with this, you want to move your bishop into the center on d5, pinning their knight to their rook. And the best part is that they have no way to really get rid of your bishop. So after like bishop b7 here, you can simply castle, bishop b7, and knight to c3. You're just developing very well. You're going to play rook to e1, bishop f4, and eventually rotate this knight into the central e4 position, which is where it really wants to go. What else can they try? They can try taking on d4 with their pawn. This is probably one of their best options, but here you simply want to castle, and we reach a position where once again knight g5 becomes very dangerous. If d6 here, knight g5, we're already completely winning. So because of that, bishop to c5 here is better to try and defend, but still not that great. After e5 here, knight goes to g4, and now this is just a good position, and go bishop f4, maybe bishop to d5 here, and also probably c3 to break in the center. You are doing very, very well there. They can try to take on d4 with their knight. If they do this, then after takes and takes, even better than taking back right away is e5 to attack their knight, and it must drop back to g8, which is extremely ugly, and now you would have queen to f3 here, and already you are actually just completely winning here with the threat of checkmate and the rook. Their only good move here, according to the engine, is bishop b7, and just full on sacrifice knight, which I know for a fact no people are going to play. Now they must take on f6 here, at which point you can just castle. They might get some attack here, but there's really nothing. Maybe some queen g6 business. You can simply play a check and then go f3, and there is really no danger here. And lastly, their best line here is probably d6, just trying to be solid and consolidate. But here you have a very nice line. Takes, they take back with the pawn. Queen takes on d8. If they take with the king, then knight g5, and this is getting pretty bad for them. Instead, knight capturing back is their best try, and now you're simply going to capture, and castle. Engine gives this as about equal, but you have various rook e1 ideas. Their king is stuck in the center, and I much prefer your position. Next, let's take a look at the old Steinitz variation with pawn to d6. Here, we're now going to play pawn to d4. Same push we see in a lot of variations, and here it is better than ever. Trying to be solid and defend like this just doesn't work very well. Most people are going to capture, at which point you're simply going to take back with your knight, go for this business. Their only really good move here is to block with their bishop, at which point now your development is very easy. Knight to c3, and most people are going to try and break out a little bit with a knight takes on d4, and you now are going to capture. They take back with the queen, queen takes, knight to f6, and this is just a good position here. You can just castle, but my favorite way of playing is to actually go bishop to f4 and long castle. And bishop f4 might not look like the best move, but the idea here is that sooner or later you're going to make the pawn to e5 push, which this supports, and this is getting pretty brutal against black already. You're going to move your other rook to the center. Yeah, you're doing awesome here. For other moves they can try, they can play a bishop d7 a move sooner, like here, bishop d7 in this position. It's still not that good. You're going to go knight to c3 here. If they try capturing with a pawn, then after knight takes back, that transposes into the main line. If they play a6 to attack your bishop, you actually just have a big advantage here. After bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes, and now knight takes on e5. At the end of the day, you're just up a pawn with a better endgame. Soon you'll probably play f3 to keep the pawn defended. I mean, yeah, up a pawn in endgame, you're doing very well. Another endgame line is the move knight to f6 here to attack e4, at which point we have the moves bishop takes, and here we want to take on e5 and win that pawn, but then black could win our pawn on e4, which we certainly do not want. So here we simply go queen to d3, just defend the pawn very simply. If they capture on d4, then we simply take back for the knight, attack their bishop, we're going to keep developing, castle, we're just doing awesome, very, very good position. Most people are going to go bishop e7 here and just try to get castled, at which point you're going to capture, knight takes on e5, and when they take your queen, you take back with the pawn, and now sky is defended. You're up pawn in an endgame. You'll potentially trade your knight for their bishop, and yeah, just keep developing here, probably long castle once again. You're also doing very well. Now let's take a look at the bird variation with knight to d4. It's definitely odd, but does have some merit, and here what you want to do, you want to just go ahead, trade that knight, they capture back, and just castle. Black's plan here is c6, trying to go d5 here and attack your bishop simultaneously, but it is pretty flimsy. Here you simply want to go bishop c4, and after d5 here, you have a pretty brutal way of destroying them. You're going to capture, they take back. First you play this check, bishop d7 is their only good move. You now play this check. In 90% of games, black goes bishop e7, which is a losing move because of the savage queen to g4. Take advantage that g7 is now undefended and they cannot take with the bishop because you are pinning here. And the idea is after they capture, you take on g7, they have no way of defending your rook, and you bet you are going to go ahead, capture that rook. You're now up a ton of material, and I mean, yeah, you're just already winning here. Their better move would be knight to e7, which nobody knows, and even if they do know it, you'll simply play c4 here. This trade is of no worry. Your pawn structure is a little messed up, but they have a worse pawn structure with doubled isolated d-pawns. And even worse, their development is really stunted with this extremely annoying pin. You are doing awesome here. The only other line you might want to know is if they try, instead of d5, b5 here to attack your bishop like this, but this is not challenging. You simply are going to back up, a5 here. a4 is a threat attacking your bishop, but simply you'll play a4 yourself, and after b4 here, rook to e1, you just have more development, better control of the center, and you'll play c3 here to break in the center. Yeah, you're doing awesome. Next, let's take a look at the Jaenisch Gambit, or the Schliemann Defense, with pawn to f5. This is better than your typical gambit, attacking your e4 pawn, and what you want to do here, you want to stay solid, you want to go d3. They have two moves here, knight to f6, or pawn takes on e4, which is more common, and here we want to play now, just go ahead and take back. They'll now likely play knight to f6 here, attacking your pawn, and here you don't want to defend just yet, simply castle. If they try to capture, this is just not good. Rook to e1, and this is going to be a pretty big problem for them. Knight drops back to f6, and you capture, and you're already doing quite a bit better there. Instead, bishop to c5 is their more common and better alternative, and what we want to do here is you want to go on this odd-looking rotation, queen to d3. The point here is that after d6, they can also play d6 on the previous move, but you still want to go for the same rotation, c4, preventing them from castling. And additionally here, you're also putting pressure on their bishop. And they have two moves here. If they try bishop d7 to try and unpin, you want to go and capture. Bishop takes back, and now knight takes on e5 here, taking advantage of the fact that if they capture, you can take their bishop, and so if they're smart, they'll try and go for a desperado. Bishop takes on f2 check here. You take back with your rook, and after captures, simply knight to c3, and you are just better here. More open position, you'll also play bishop g5 here, and that is a quite brutal pin they have to deal with, and all the tactics go in your favor. The other move they can try is queen to e7 to try and go bishop e6 and block out your queen. Well, now you simply go knight to c3, bishop to e6 here, and you're going to launch your knight into d5. attacking everybody, and there is a lot going on, but in reality there's really not. You now have an extremely powerful knight in the center that if black tries to trade will only lead to more problems for them. Now let's back up to this position. The other move they could try is knight to f6. And if they go like this, here you actually want to capture on a f5. The point being, after pawn to d6 here, with this attack, you simply want to ignore it and go d4. A crazy looking move, but you are dominating in so many of these positions because you're going to go d5 now, attack their knight. That is a pretty big problem. And when facing that, just about everybody tries pawn to e4 to counterattack your knight, and you want to go d5 here. Just completely ignore this. Capturing looks good, but is actually losing because after you take here, you're now threatening this with that, which is pretty brutal. And if they try to capture you, then you get this fork, and that is also just completely losing for them. Their only move here that doesn't lose is a6 to attack your bishop, and here you're going to capture. They take here, you take them b7, they take of the bishop, and now knight d4. Your pawn is kept defended. You also have ideas of launching your knight into e6 now, which can be really brutal, and along that you also castle, and you have a great game. And lastly, I have the Cozio Defense with knight g to e7, defending their knight with the other knight, which is trickier than it seems. The move you want to play here is knight to c3. And black has a couple options. I'll take a look at a6 first, attacking your bishop. You want to back it up to a4. b5 now, attacking your bishop again. You back up to b3. And here, it branches off a little bit. Knight to g6 is their main move, at which point you have a fun line with pawn to d4, striking in the center. Most people are going to capture. You take back with your knight. This is the best line. Capture, capture. And here you're doing well. The only thing you have to worry about is if they try c5 here. And this can get a little scary. Don't just back up, because then c4 and your bishop is lost. The way to play here is you capture on f7 with check. And after king takes back, you have queen to d5 here. And you're just forking them and winning a rook. And if they play just about anything else here, like, I don't know, pawn to d6, you can just go bishop d5 here, castle, and you have a very good game. What else can they try? They can try pawn to d6 here. That doesn't work very well though. Knight g5 and fried liver, pretty brutal for them. d5 is their only way of even attempting to survive, and then knight takes on d5 here, and now there's just so many brutal ideas, and they are probably already losing. They might have some way of getting out of it, but most of the time they'll be lost. They can also try h6, just a calm waiting move, preventing any pieces from getting to g5. But now here, once again, d4, striking in the center. We get those same trades we saw a second ago. d6 here. And now the best way to play is to go ahead and strike against them on the queen side immediately with pawn to a4. And this also has the benefit of freeing up this square for our bishop, which is the reason we cannot just castle here right away, because then c5, our queen must back up, and c4, our bishop is trapped, and here we have no trick to get out. So a4, and you're doing very, very well there. For other moves they can try, all the way back here, instead of a6, they can try pawn to g6, a kind of fianchetto. And here you have that same move once again, pawn to d4. However, instead of capturing, they can also try the sideline here, bishop g7, which gets really fun with the following line: captures, knight takes back, knight takes, bishop takes, queen to f3, putting pressure on their king side and getting ready to long castle here. They castle, bishop to h6, attacking their rook, bishop g7, blocking, and after takes and takes, long castles. You were doing very well here. And your main plan is to start going h4 and h5 on some big attack that black is going to have a bit of trouble actually defending. The other move they can try here, pawn takes on d4. And while capturing back is fine, in Belgrade Gambit style, the best way to play here is knight to d5. Hopping in the center, things get pretty crazy. If they try capturing us, we simply take back. And I mean, we're just doing fine here. They have a lot of problems with the open e-file, and we're doing well. But what gets crazy is bishop to g7. You're now going to play bishop g5, h6 here, because this is a very big problem. Bishop f6, bishop takes, knight takes with check, And after king to f8 here, you simply want to castle, and while black is up a pawn here, you have a very strong knight on f6 that can always drop back to d5 when needed, and their king cannot castle here, and their pawns on the king's side are kind of messed up, leading to potentially another very big attack for us. Alright, well I hope you have a fantastic day. Like and subscribe for more videos like this, become a member to pick future opening videos, they pick this one, and I will see you next time.